Well, the South African Union of Students is concerned about the treatment of students at the University of Limpopo. It claims the university has not paid off campus student accommodation allowances for the year.
Video footage has also emerged allegedly showing some students being beaten. The union is appealing to the university and NSFAS to ensure students receive allowances. For more on this, we're joined now by South African Union of Students spokesperson Asive Landra. A very good morning to you, Asive, and thank you so much for joining us. So, what exactly is being done to the students? We just, for the purposes of context and understanding the story in its entirety, what exactly is being done to the students?
Good morning, and Sisvey. I think, as you say, for context, the students probably for the last 9 months, well, in fact, since the beginning of the academic year, had been, they were due to receive obviously their confirmation of being funded by NSFAS. They were due to receive all the allowances. Now, when we speak of NSFAS allowances, they would have had received their tuition allowances, which would have been paid directly to the institution. They would have also received their book and meal allowances, which either would be paid to their student cards or their banks. And then they would also receive their housing, or rather their accommodation allowance. For the students that are living on campus, that would be paid directly to the institution. And for the students that are living off campus, one of two things would have happened, which did not happen at the University of Limpopo. One, either the monies would have been paid directly to the landlords with which the students have a lease agreement with. The second one would have been either that the monies would have been paid to the students for them to be able to pay their landlords. Now, what happened at the University of Limpopo is that the students they have not been able to receive their allowances on account of the fact that they would have had to live, as per the NSFAS and the Department of Higher Education guidelines, they would have had to live in accredited student accredited accommodations that would have been accredited by the institution. But the institution failed to accredit as much beds as they would need, particularly for the NSFAS beneficiaries. And in the event that they're not been able to do that, they would have had to apply for what we call a deviation, which says that based on a particular set of circumstances, they're not able to accredit as many beds as they have, either because there are not enough beds or whatever the case might be. Majority of rural-based institutions, such as the University of Limpopo and many others, would have for the past 3 years been applying for those deviations. Now, in the case of Limpopo, once again, is that after you have applied for the deviation, you would have had to create a framework to pay this accommodation allowance, and this was not done. So they would have responded in their statement post this protest to say no, but the students have not submitted the list agreements. And our argument is that it was not the responsibility of students to go and engage with the landlords and ensure that there is a particular framework that is agreed upon between the landlords and the institution to say this is how much, this is the maximum that you are going to pay for such a room and this and whatever. It was not the responsibility of students, and then agree on whatever, as I say, framework that they would use to be able to ensure that at the very least, if they don't pay the students, they're at least able to pay the landlord, so that students do not go for months without adequate and safe accommodation.
So now you have squarely put this as the responsibility of NSFAS, saying that because of them, actually, they're responsible for the chaos and the destruction that is happening in the university. And more than that, you're saying also the Vice-Chancellor must take accountability for such.
Number one, we cannot absolve the National Financial Aid Scheme from the responsibility and from taking responsibility for what happened in University of Limpopo. We say this because NSFAS has a contractual obligation to the students to ensure that the students and the children of the poor and the working class from the application stage up until the disbursement stage, they have a responsibility to ensure that these students have received their allowances. It would be ludicrous for them. In fact, as far as the state and parliament is concerned, they are the implementing agency. They are no different from SASSA that must ensure that they take the last full responsibility to ensure that all social funds and grants have gotten to the people whom they have determined to be deserving of such. Now, same with NSFAS. They have that responsibility. Unfortunately, NSFAS would have seconded that responsibility to institutions, often incompetent institutions, as we are seeing at the University of Limpopo. We make this assertion as a faith because we have 26 institutions in South Africa, rather universities. Of those 26 universities, 80% of them probably have more than 70% students who are NSFAS beneficiaries. And we are not seeing the chaos that you are seeing at the University of Limpopo, which goes back to my third point, where we had been calling on NSFAS, and this is why we are putting the responsibility on them. We had been saying to them, they must establish a nation, a universal framework of the disbursements of funds. Let them not leave it to the prerogative of the universities, because it is not the universities that are constitutionally and legislatively obligated to ensure that our students are funded. It is the scheme. So they must ensure that they develop a nationwide framework that we will agree on its minimum standards and protocols and standard operating procedures, all stakeholders within the sector, that will be used by all universities, so that we don't have VIDs being able to pay out disbursements how and when they like, and WUSU doing as and when they like, Limpopo as and when they like. It would have dealt with these issues. The Vice Chancellor, to move on to the next point, has been absolutely and extremely arrogant and very incompetent at that. The man has been at the helm of that institution for more than 2 decades, and there is nothing to show for it as far as the University of Limpopo is concerned. He is just pocketing millions every month, but for the last 20 years or so. But there is nothing, rather not every month, but rather every year. But there's nothing to show for it. If anything, he has consistently brutalized and victimized students. We have been saying this for many years, and now you would have spoken about it at the opening of this story. He has been beating up students through private security. In fact, the violence and the destruction of property that we have seen at the University of Limpopo is a direct result, provocation, and escalation from the violence that had been meted out against students. Because we have been saying, when you beat students and you are violent towards them, then naturally violence will beget violence. So what happens there is that this creates a room and an opportunity for opportunistic and criminal elements to get into the space and destroy property, which we condemn, by the way, in the strongest possible. We condemn violence and the destruction of property by the strongest terms possible, because we need these facilities for the children of the poor and the working class. However, we are saying, in our experience, all destruction of property has always been a direct result and of a provocation and violence that is being meted out against students, and in turn they often regrettably respond also violently, sometimes unfortunately, towards our infrastructure.
Mr. Zandra, obviously, I think this is a conversation that will need the response from the university, and perhaps we can take it as far as national government with the Minister of Higher Education. But we will leave it there with you. Thank you very much for coming through and expressing your concerns on behalf of the students of the University of Limpopo. That is the South African Union of Students spokesperson, Asive Zandra.